Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody. I am ObjectivelyDan, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. This is the show where we talk about what people believe and why every single week, live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. This is a call-in show, so if you are watching this live, you can call in at the number below and talk to me and my wonderful guest, whose name was misspelled in the intro. I'm so sorry about that, wonderful guest, Ross Blocher. We have since corrected that in the actual show now, but Ross Blocher of Oh No, Ross and Carrie is joining us again today.
Thank you.
With us last year, and so happy that you're back.
Great to be back. Thank you, Dan. Awesome to be here.
Yes. So, in case you guys are not aware, Ross Blocher is the Ross of the Oh No, Ross and Carrie podcast, which is a fantastic podcast. I happen to be a personal fan of, which does. I mean, what would you say? You guys kind of do. You do a lot. What would you say you do, Ross?
Yeah, it's all about firsthand investigations of fringe science, spirituality, claims of the paranormal, fringe religious groups, alternative medical treatments. So our deal is we go there firsthand, we try it out, and we report back on what happens, how they tried to talk us into it, how much it cost, how they, the various people offering this respond to tough questions. So yeah, we have a lot of fun with it and get ourselves in some really weird situations.
Yes, which I think makes us natural allies, because last time you were on, I saw a lot of comments saying, oh, we love Ross and stuff. It's like, oh, we have mixed audiences here because we love fringe science. We love the paranormal. We love conspiracies. I mean, we don't love them like we support them, but we like talking about them. So I'm really glad you get to join us again, Ross.
It's a platonic relationship. Yeah.
Is it platonic though? Because I feel like there's a lot of give, but not a lot of take, or maybe a lot of take, but not a lot of give. You know what I'm saying?
Fair enough. Well, we try to make it a Socratic relationship.
Socratic relationship. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
If not platonic.
I'll take that much. So Ross, I want to kind of start this off by just because you're just always doing something. You're saying today you're going to go see a psychic for
New Year, got to see a psychic. It's become sort of a tradition for Carrie and I every year. We'll kind of review the past year and we'll look at a bunch of psychics and other prognosticators and what they said so confidently about the previous year. So that'll be our next episode coming out. It's just 2021 in review. How well did we do? We made our own predictions. But then we also talked to a psychic at the beginning of the year just to see what we can expect in our personal lives. And then we can review that later on and see how they did.
So that's a really fun thing to do. But it's been almost a year since you've been back on. It was actually, we were just looking, it's March of last year since last time you were on. So what's been going on, Ross Blocher? What have you been up to?
Oh boy. Lots of fun stuff. Most recently, this was kind of indulgent. This wasn't a firsthand investigation, but when Christmas was coming, I thought it was time to talk about Jesus's birth narrative. So every now and then I'll go on this Bible bender because I come out of an evangelical background and have a lot of Bible knowledge floating around in my head. And I still keep studying that all the time. So This is my chance just to talk about the problems with the birth narrative for Jesus. So that was a fun way to ruin Christmas for everybody.
Right? Yeah. By the way, for Christmas, in case you guys are wondering, I did get this lovely bathrobe for Christmas, and that is why I am wearing it today with the comfy couch in the background. That's the theme today. Today's theme is just comfy.
It's lovely.
So it's really, really nice. I gotta say, if you've never done this for yourself, you should get a bathrobe or ask somebody to get you a bathrobe. Oh my goodness, I feel so fancy in this thing.
Wow.
It's a level of comfort and difference that you just can't replace. So anyway, that's my bathrobe tangent. Please continue on with more important matters.
No, that's pretty important. Well, I also got certified as a cryptozoologist through an online course.
Right. Okay. Yes. That's a whole thing. So how, who, Where and why? What? How?
Yeah. So there's this online school called the Center of Excellence, and it's just this place where you can get certificates, diplomas for various things. And they offer all kinds of wild stuff. You know, like Carrie took a class in crystal healing. So that was hers. And then as a certified crystal healer, she gave me treatment. And in the past, we both were certified as naturopaths. So we're both now you can just say, you know, oh, I'm a certified whatever it is. I don't know if I got my air quotes within the frame.
Certified freak.
Certified. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then you can hang a shingle and make money doing whatever it is. And oftentimes earn continuing education credits for actual academic pursuits, which is an issue. You know, if you can get continuing education credits for something that is not too reputable, that's a problem. So it's one of these sort of like online, not diploma mills, but, you know, sort of online courses where they've hired someone to write this curriculum. You take it at your own pace. And actually, I found the cryptozoology course to be a little more responsible than I was expecting. It actually had some good skeptical information. It was mentioning people like Joe Nickel and Ben Radford and actual like skeptical investigators. So I thought they actually did a much better job than I was expecting them to.
Okay, so like are there certain ones where they're just like, oh yeah, that's totally not real? Like, were they very definitive on any of these, or?
I mean, I would say that they left you with that as being the most salient takeaway point for a lot of the the cryptids that they were talking about: Bigfoot, Yeti, Mothman, where they would tell you, here's the content of the legend and kind of what we believe about Thunderbirds or what have you. But then they would tell you about some of the famous cases and how they were proven to be fakes, hoaxes, or at the very least, they'll present some other popular theories and some scientific theories that I thought at the end of each one kind of left me saying, okay, well, it's a cool story, but it's not verified. So yeah, good on them. But I have a certificate.
So now that you've taken this course, are there some cryptids where you're like, well, I don't know actually if this might be real or not?
That's a good question.
Are you more convinced? Like I'm thinking like the dinosaurs in Africa or something, or like, you know.
Oh, right. Yeah, they didn't actually talk about Mokele Membe, so
that's what I'm. Yeah,
I kept referencing that one in my free response questions. You know, because you have to write little. Okay. You write essays and they grade you. Some anonymous grader. You find out at the end what their name is, at least. But there's the kind of permanent student inside of me who wants to ace this test, as silly as it is. So Carrie will go through very quickly and she'll kind of test the test to see if she can say patent nonsense and get away with it. And she does. And then I'll like pour hours into writing these detailed responses. And I got 100% across the board for what that's worth. Yeah. But yeah, I would still love to tromp off into the woods to look for some of these creatures. Like they were talking about anacondas and how there's reputed giant snakes in the Amazonian basin that are supposed to be even larger than the already absurdly large snakes that
I was going to say, like, they're kind of are giant snakes, right? But how big are they talking? They're talking like,
yeah. So like, I think the actual biggest snakes would be like in the 30-foot plus range, where they're talking about 50, 60, 100 feet in length. Now this is interesting about cryptozoology, because oftentimes you'll find that there were previous creatures that match these descriptions. Like we were talking about Mokele Membe, that's essentially just supposed to be like an aquatic dinosaur. The same with the Loch Ness Monster. Most people think of it as a plesiosaur. And so we know such things have existed. And there was this thing called the Titanoboa that lived like, I don't know, I'm going to say, I may be wrong about this, but, you know, like 50 million years ago or something. But like you can look up recreations of this, and it was an absurdly, like freakishly large snake. So such things have existed. But the question is, do they still? And the answer is probably not.
Okay. Interesting. So you're not convinced of any new cryptids?
I'm not. No, but every time I read about cryptids, I find out about some new one, like the Mongolian death worm or something. And it's like, oh man, I got to learn more.
One of my favorite ones was, there was this guy on Twitter. I can't remember if he messaged me first or what, but his Twitter username was the Deer Man. and he had this whole blog dedicated to this creature called the Deer Man, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's an anthropomorphic deer that lives in Alberta, Canada, I believe is what it was. And I went back and forth. I was like, dude, you got to call in.
Yeah.
We could talk about this. And he said he would. And I don't know, something happened. But anyway, Deer Man, if you're listening, please come tell me about the Deer Man, because I want to know.
Yeah, or if the Deer Man itself is listening, also call in.
Yes.
Yeah. Anthropomorphic.
Anthropomorphic. Yeah.
Antlerpomorphic. I'm working on this.
Okay. I see you. All right. Okay. So you became a cryptozoologist, or at least certified cryptozoologist. You basically just debunked the whole Jesus narrative single-handedly. You just did it yourself.
I do what I have to. And we've done some other fun stuff. We went to a rage room. I tried out one of those Shakti mats, those things with the little sharp jabby backs on them. It's kind of like the old bed of nails, but it's like a modern plastic version.
Okay.
That you lay on, and it's supposed to be therapeutic.
Go back. What's a rage room? I don't know what that is.
Okay, so a rage room, the idea is it's kind of based on this theory of pent-up anger, this idea that we have a reservoir of anger stored up, and if we don't get it out, then it's going to come out in some other way. So the idea is you go to this place, and they have one in LA where they've set up, you can pay for different packages, but they've set up like porcelain items or glass or printers, and even a car, and you get like a bat and a lead pipe and a candlestick. Okay, now I'm just thinking of Clue. But like you get these weapons, and you go after these things and wail on them in a room where you're wearing like a mechanic suit and a face covering and everything, so you'll be safe, and you just smash stuff to get your anger out.
So that's the classic thing where somebody's like, oh, well, you just need to get that out. You need to go hit stuff, right? I remember trying that as a kid and never feeling like that was very satisfying.
I think you've intuitively hit on the answer, which is no. Yeah, that's not an accurate model of anger. And it was fun. One thing we get to do with the podcast, and this one fun thing about being a podcaster is you get to reach out to people that you want to talk to. Yeah, and in this case, one of my favorite authors, Carol Tavris, had written a book called Anger, the Misunderstood Emotion. So after we were done wailing on a car and all of these bottles, Carrie and I met up with Carol Tavris to talk about the actual psychology behind anger. And it turns out you have to do things like directly face the people who are upsetting you or the things that are upsetting you and find rational ways to deal with it. And none of it involves hitting anything.
Well, who would have thought? Well, I imagine it's probably good that you are doing the podcast that you do in LA. I imagine just LA gives you kind of a lot of material to work with, right?
Yeah. It's kind of a center of spirituality in the U.S. I was listening to a lecture about this once, and the presenter was talking about how you've had the burned over district in Upper New York. That was kind of a spiritual center in the US in the 1830s. And we got spiritualism from that area. And then you had Boston, we got Christian Science and a lot of other movements from there. You had Chicago. Chicago's also birthed a lot of spiritual movements in the US. And LA really has been a center of so many of them, more than people would think. So everything's here. And even if it didn't start here, they have to have a presence in LA because that's where the people are.
That's where they are. That's where everybody's at. And that's the people who are most likely to believe in whatever you're panhandling or whatever, right? Like that's got to be in LA, right? I feel like Austin, there's a market for that too. Probably not to the degree of LA, but I think the craziest thing I've seen, or maybe the most out there stuff I've seen, there was a veterinary place that did homeopathic cures and I think Reiki as well. I think that's the weirdest I've seen, where it's you've combined very specific disciplines into one thing there. I don't know. And there's all kinds of crazy massage of every kind that you can think of here. I think too, that's pretty popular. But
well, we've talked about how easy it is to get, certified in such things, and there's no governing boards. So it's very easy for these vendors to add just a list of various things that they offer. Like Carrie and I this year, we got a past life reading from the psychic in the Los Feliz neighborhood in Los Angeles. And she very clearly did not want to give us a past life reading. She kept trying to sell us on tarot and other things that we've done before. And that, we wanted a past life reading from her, but she wanted to add in all these other things, of course, for an extra fee.
Right. Of course. That's what it was. And this is an old joke, and you never get a past life reading of, oh, well, you were a custodian in another life or something, right? Like it's never something that degree. It's always Jesus or like Cleopatra, always the fun stuff, right?
So funny that you should mention Cleopatra because sure enough, when Carrie got her reading, she was like a handmaid to Cleopatra. And I don't think Cleopatra was named, but it was so clear. Like, I see you in Egypt and with a ruler there, a female ruler, and it seems like you're waiting on her hand and foot, that sort of thing.
Oh.
And it was so funny because I was back there in that neighborhood the other day to go buy a book at the bookstore across the street. And I noticed that there was a big mural right outside that psychic. I don't know how I missed this before, but there were paintings of old Hollywood stars. And sure enough, one of them was Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, like right across the street. It was so funny.
Man. So like, you think she literally like just saw that and was like, yeah, I'll use that one today. Like how many times has she used that on people? That's
wow. Carrie and I did we're a part of the Maximum Fun Network, and for the donors, we did one event where we were doing a live psychic reading, and we were teaching them how to bend spoons and tell fortunes and stuff like that. And we did I did actual background checks on these people, and so did Carrie. So we had like frighteningly detailed information about them. But one of the things that we did was I stored up a bunch of obscure rulers. And so whenever I would do like a past life reading, I would give them some absurd,
gotcha.
very, very obscure.
King Donaldson the Eighth of the old,
right. He was known as the onion peeler or something like that, because the Cleopatra and Napoleon thing, come on, it's just overdone.
Right. That's really funny. Yeah, that's a good trick to try. Say like, see if you know this historical figure. How does this make you feel?
Yeah, go look it up. I'm sure it'll all be true.
Sure, yeah, of course. Well, folks, we still have open lines, which means you can talk to me and Ross pretty much about whatever you want. It could be Christianity, Scientology. Ross has some background in that. Demonology, cryptozoology, all the ologies, really. Any ologies. If you got stuff going on that you want advice for, if you just want to say hi, please just give us a call and we will talk to you. Now, Russ, you were saying a bit before the show, you were talking about your recent, Christmas story thing that you did. And you mentioned that you talked with your family about this.
So normally I don't do this. I'm not out to rain on parades, and I don't want to, like when everybody's sitting around the baby Jesus nativity scene, I don't want to, be like, well, actually, the Magi and the shepherds wouldn't have been there at the same time, even if this were true.
You put your fedora on and you're just ready to go, right?
Yeah. Exactly. But with my mom, I can talk about these things, and it was all kind of fresh in my mind. And we were having, with our delayed Christmas celebration, we were having a real talk about the Bible. And so it's always fun, especially with some of these biblical contradictions. And in this case, about the Jesus narrative, it's fun to just hand someone a Bible and say, well, here, look for this. Look at this yourself. It's kind of like a magician saying, like, now this is a completely ordinary pack of cards, right? It's a fresh box of, bicycle cards. I haven't done anything with them. It's kind of the same thing. Like, this is your Bible. I haven't manipulated it in any way. I swear this is actually in the Bible. So in this case, I had her first look at, Matthew 1 starts with the genealogy in Matthew. There's only two gospels that tell the birth narrative, and one is Matthew, the other is Luke.
Yes. And they're different. They're not the same.
They're very different. That's the problem. Yeah. And Mark, which doesn't have any birth narrative, it was written before Matthew and Luke, and they both borrowed from it. And both of them clearly saw that there was a missing backstory for Jesus, and like, well, we better add it, but they added it in different ways. So anyway, I could get lost down that, but I had my mom look at the genealogy and asked her, well, what is Joseph's father's name? Because for some reason they want to trace David, King David, of course. They need to show the
messianic lineage.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that the kingship has passed down through the sons. And so they take from David down to Joseph, but well, that's already kind of wrong because we know Joseph wasn't the actual father.
Right.
So anyways, I asked her, so what's Joseph's father's name? And so she looked it up in Matthew, and she's like, oh, Heli. Or no, it was Jacob and Matthew. And so, okay, and I've spoiled the punchline, but okay, well, remember that Jacob, we know Jacob. So that's Joseph's father's name. Okay, let's go to Luke 3. And there's a genealogy there. Okay, so what's Joseph's father's name? And she looks it up. Heli. Yeah, who's Heli? That's weird. I thought it was Jacob. And then I told her about how, like, if you look at the genealogies, the number of generations from David to Jesus in Matthew is something like 28, and then in Luke it's 42.
It's like twice as long.
It's like they're 15 generations off, whatever it is, and so it's like 100. Well, let's see, it'll be like
it also
300 years.
Goes back to Adam as well.
Yeah, so the one in Luke tries to get you all the way back to Adam and then the Son of God. So they really want to get all of human history. And then you can see each of them were playing with these kind of holy numbers that they were trying to achieve. So Luke has a list of 77 generations. So he was trying to get the 77. And you can see when you compare with the Old Testament, when you get these lists in Chronicles and Genesis 10 through 11, you can see that he's added a couple extra names just to pad his list and get it to 77, because clearly God wanted that holy number. Whereas Matthew was trying to get 3 sets of 14, or 6 sets of 7, essentially. So yeah, both of them were just doing this kind of fudging to make their story fit, just kind of like Isaac Newton did with colors. He saw the spectrum and he said, okay, well, I see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Well, we better add another one to make it 7 colors, because that's God's holy plan, obviously. Isaac Newton was a brilliant guy, but he was really caught up in biblical numerology.
Right. Yeah. So you said this to your family, and they were just, or your mom specifically. And what happened there? She was just like, did she say anything about that?
Well, I can do this with my mom because she'll take it, she'll hear it, you'll have an interesting conversation, and then later on she finds this big red button that says reset on it, and she clicks that, and then it's just like boom, back to normal. She's never heard anything. She's got her own little like Men in Black eraser that makes her forget everything. But you'll catch her in the moment and she'll be like, oh, I need to look at this more, I need to talk to my pastor about this. I don't think she actually does due diligence. But yeah, the one thing that really got her was I was going to show her another story in Luke 1 about Elizabeth and Zechariah, the parents of John the Baptist. Luke invents this whole backstory for John the Baptist to make him actually a relative, maybe even a cousin of Jesus. Which is so weird, because like, how does he go from being this suburban kid to being this crazy man out in the wilderness wearing camel hair and
then wanted by a king? Kind of crazy.
Right. Eventually beheaded. Right. Yeah. Like, well, something wild happened in his life, but I guess we all have wild situations.
We all have our tales. Okay.
So
sometimes we just need to go out in the woods for a little bit. And
find ourselves. So I was going to show her this, and then I asked her, so Mom, when did the Holy Spirit come to the earth? And she said, oh, well, after Jesus died, he said, I will send you another counselor, protector, or, Pentecost. I got her to agree to that. The Holy Spirit shows up at Pentecost. So in Luke 1, Luke does not have that memo, and he accidentally predates the presence of the Holy Spirit. And he says that Elizabeth, John the Baptist's mother, while Jesus is there in the womb, she is filled with the Holy Spirit. And later on in that same story, Zechariah is filled with the Holy Spirit. And my mom, after having just admitted the Holy Spirit did not come to the world until Pentecost, after Jesus's death, and she reads this, she just sat there with like staring into space for 20 seconds. Just like, she just did not know what to do with that at all.
Interesting. I've heard so many apologetics on this. I've actually heard that the Holy Spirit was actually there in the Old Testament, and that instances where they talk about God or an angel are actually the Holy Spirit. Like when Daniel and Daniel's friends, when they see the angel, that's supposed to be the Holy Spirit, or like, was it Jacob that wrestles with God?
Yep.
Right. Yep. And so that's, I've heard stuff like that. But it's funny when you talk about the genealogy stuff, because that stuff's really interesting to me, if only for the fact of the workarounds I've heard about that. So there's 2 mainly that I've heard of. One is that Luke is actually, I think it's
talking about Mary.
Talking about Mary, right?
Something about Mary. Yeah.
Something about Mary. And the reasoning is, well, she's a woman, so we wouldn't write her name in a book. That's just crazy, right? So and like Jewish lineages, are different about men and women and how they record stuff. It's just like, okay, well,
yeah, and in the genealogies, like occasionally they do mention, who was the wife or who was the husband of, and like they'll put a woman in there. And okay, maybe, but we have the problem of the mismatch of generations. So that's still a problem. And also, why would the Bible lie about that to be politically correct? That's not what the Bible says.
Here's the other interpretation I've heard, Ross, which is that it's the genealogy is actually symbolic. It's not a literal genealogy. It's supposed to be like, oh, look, here's the savior, and he comes from these flawed people who had, these relationships with God, and this is how we trace back. And it's like, okay, I don't know what the point of a genealogy is, if not like as a literal, like that's about as literal as you can get, right? That's like your tax document saying, well, this is symbolic right here. I don't know.
I mean, that's fine if you got to do that to make it work, but just know what you're doing and then wonder why you're not doing it with the rest of the text. But one of the drop dead arguments, in terms of the historical connection, because we don't have much about Jesus and outside of the Bible, and certainly not during his lifetime. Those references came much later, so not much in history, but we do know about some of the characters that are mentioned. So in Matthew, you have this whole story about how Herod the Great meets the wise men and sends them off, and he's like doing this little bit of espionage thing because he wants to make sure that he has no competition. He's got to kill this new king of the Jews. And so then Joseph hears in a vision that he needs to go hide in Egypt for a while. And then he comes back after Herod dies. So that's all to say, we know when Herod died. He died in 4 BC, and we have good historical record of this. So that sets like kind of a date. And then you find Christians in the awkward position of saying, well, Jesus was probably born 6 years BC or before Christ. He's born 6 years before himself.
Right. Yeah.
But in Luke, so in Matthew, you've got them already living in Bethlehem. That's just where they are. Whereas Luke has to invent a different method to get Jesus down to Bethlehem. And so he has this whole census thing. There's no census in Matthew. And he says, he actually names when Quirinius was the governor of Syria, there was the census, and everyone had to report to that home of their ancient ancestors. That's never happened in anything, but in all of history. But anyway, so they go down, and they are from Nazareth in Galilee originally, and they go 80 miles down to Bethlehem for that. So totally different chronologies and timelines there. But there's a problem because Quirinius, we know when he was made legate of Syria, and it was in 6 AD. So there's a 9-year discrepancy there between when Herod died and when Quirinius was actually made governor. And then they would have had a census, but not at all like the census described. So, oops, that's a real problem. And everybody admits it's a problem. That's where they have to fudge a bit and say, well, Luke got that little detail wrong.
Got that wrong. And then they talk about Josephus, and then, it's a whole thing. It's very interesting, the apologetics that goes behind.
And Josephus does mention Jesus twice, and it's very minimal. And a lot of people think that those mentions were later tampered with by Christians.
At least one of them, if not both, I believe is the current working theories. But the crew's telling me we got to take calls because we've been talking for a little bit. We're going over time here. But Ross, I'm so happy to have you. Of course, Ross Blocher from Oh No, Ross and Carrie podcast. Really great.
I'll throw in one other thing. Just if anybody's interested in that whole Bethlehem thing, we've talked about some of the Gospels, but if you take a look at John 7, you'll see a very interesting take where John did not believe Jesus was actually born in Bethlehem, and people say that. It's pretty cool.
Yes, that's another thing I've heard too, which is really interesting when you think about, like, I don't know, just in my brain, like, of course, Jesus is from Bethlehem. That's like the foundations of faith. Like, well, that's not actually. Nope. Everybody thinks that. So
probably not.
Really interesting. If we will try to get, we're going to get to everybody's calls today, I think. Hopefully, everybody should try to call in if you can. But just in case we can't, we also have the after show that we're going to do right after this in the fan run Discord server. So please take a look at that. But before we get to calls, Ross, we have to thank our lovely patron of the week, because this show is run by the folks at home, who donate to this show, everybody who donates on patreon.com and who donates in other ways. Thank you guys so much for donating to the show. You guys rock. You help keep the lights on and make this show happen every single week. So thank you guys. We always give a shout out to one patron every single week. And this week's patron of the week is with I Heart Dogs. I Heart Dogs. Thank you so much, I Heart Dogs. I Heart Dogs too. That's a great name. I love that. So thank you, I Heart Dogs, and thank you to everybody who donates on patreon.com/truthwanted. You guys rock. Okay, Ross, we are now ready to get to some calls. Are you ready?
Cool. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. This is a great one to start. Oh man, there's a couple really good ones here, Ross. there's a couple good ones. Everybody stay on the line, please. I want to get to everybody. Okay. I'm going to start with Tony. Tony, you're calling in from Mexico. Tony, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello, Dan.
Hello, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I've called before and I wanted to say hi. And since you mentioned that Ross has some background in Scientology, I decided to give a call and ask him about that. Because in the city where I live, there's this Scientology temple, and I honestly know nothing about Scientology. I don't know what's it about. But my friend keeps getting invited by the guys over there, like come on in and stuff like that. And I told him, okay, well, maybe we should go and check it out. But I was wondering, should I be concerned? Should I not go? What would Ross have to tell me about this?
Wow, Tony, what an exciting position to be in. That's cool. Well, you are right to exercise some caution and be a little concerned about this. Because once the Scientologists know your name or have your contact information, they will be super persistent and try to get you in. As soon as they do, you can watch this. If you do go there, they will do everything they can to get you to the registrar's desk. That's like a little separate section of the Scientology org. That's what we call it rather than a temple. So it'll be a Scientology org. It might be an ideal org. That's a whole different discussion. But they'll want to get you to the registrars. And they're going to, there's a number of ways they may get you started. Sometimes it's with the free personality test. Sometimes it's with an IQ test. We did that for the podcast. But it turned, no, we did the personality test. And then what they want to do is they want to find, they won't say this to you, but they want to find your ruin. And that's something that's wrong with you, something about your life that could be better and that they may be able to help you with. So it may be relationships, it may be, ways to excel at work. They have like 8 different categories. And so what they'll try to do is they'll try to talk you into taking this introductory course, and they may offer it to you. Well, I think they'll charge you like $50 for it. I think even, I don't know, they'll offer you something for free maybe. But what they want to do is they want to reorganize your schedule, and they'll ask you very tough questions and put you on the spot about your schedule and try to like reshape your life right then and there. So you have to be, it's like going, I don't know, Tony, have you ever been to like a sales pitch for like a timeshare presentation?
Yes, I have.
So that kind of like hard sales tactics, that's what you and your friend will have to be dealing with if you get to the registrar's desk. So just if you feel like you can withstand that and not sign up for something that you don't want to, then I would say go for it. But if you're the kind of person who like just to be nice or not to make waves in a situation, will just be like, okay, sure, I'll sign up for it. Just be aware of that.
I see. Can you speak more about these 8 categories that you were talking about?
Yeah, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but they're just different things within life that you might need help with. And they're kind of common to all people. So if you take the personality test, they'll end up with this little chart they give you, like it's a little graph, and it will show sort of your performance in these different aspects. And so they may say, you have a really hard time with building friendships, or clearly you struggle with relationships, or you have a hard time focusing. And whatever it is, they have something ready for you. They say, we think you could really be helped by taking this course. And usually there will be like 2 introductory courses, and they'll both be like $50. And then there'll be like a $150 course. So they want you to take Dianetics. But essentially what they're going to do is they're going to fill up your schedule, and they want to sort of love bomb you. They'll be super friendly to you as long as you're showing up and giving them money, because they want you to keep coming back.
What's a Dianetic?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, that's a whole thing.
Yeah. So Dianetics is one of the most, copied books and translated books, just because Scientology promotes this thing endlessly. And so it was originally a book that L. Ron Hubbard wrote before he created Scientology. And so L. Ron Hubbard is the, founder of Scientology, and they still revere him. And if you go there, you'll see pictures of him everywhere. And you won't see any books written by anyone other than L. Ron Hubbard. They'll just be like bookshelves full of L. Ron Hubbard books. So Dianetics was one of those first ones. And he tried to start this as like an alternate to psychiatry and psychology. And essentially, he applied, sort of presented it to the psychological community and was sort of laughed out of town. They just wanted nothing to do with it. And so Scientologists still maintain this hatred of psychiatry that goes back to L. Ron Hubbard's rejection. But this book sticks around even after he went from Dianetics to creating this new Scientology in the early 50s. He incorporated Dianetics as just one of the pieces of learning about Scientology.
I see. Well, after what you have said, I can predict I'm not going to have a fun time going there. But
yeah, I mean, it's totally up to you. If you think that sounds like a fun thing to experience, great. Just be on your guard. But if not, yeah, stay far away, because they have a bad reputation for a reason. They are very, they're an abusive cult. And I don't hesitate at all in saying that they are really bad to their own members.
Yeah, this isn't like trying a different like Christian denomination. I would say it's probably a lot more dangerous. Like, and again, I feel like we're plugging all kinds of stuff here. But Ross, I mean, part of your investigation with Carrie was to join the organization and see how far you could get. And at every level, there's red flags. It's like red flags all over the place, and it's very easy, even for yourself as someone who was like never had plans to stay long term, still like cost you money to like stay as long as you did. So
when they finally figured out who I was and kicked me out, I was getting ready to spend $2,500 on a course that was going to be the next level. And they'll eat up your life. I remember when I was taking the Dianetics course, learning about the science of the mind, I spent 22 hours in one weekend at the church, to the point where I think I have great a great ability to withstand a lot of talk. I was getting super frustrated and I want to get out of there, like, just let me go.
Right. So Tony, like, you may have reservations about talking to other people about where they should and shouldn't go based on their faith collective. Right. And that, that's reasonable. I think this is one thing where you can say, yeah, absolutely, tell them not to go. I have no reservations about it, especially when it comes to stuff like Scientology, because it's just bad. It's never good. No one, I don't know. We've had at least one caller call in and say they've benefited from Scientology. I don't think that it's benefited most people. I think it's not that great.
Occasionally there will be a good insight. Like L. Ron Hubbard was a smart guy, and occasionally he said nice or good things, but none of those require you to believe in ancient space aliens or body thetans or anything like that.
Right. So, Tony, I hope that was helpful. Any other thoughts you want to give us before we go on to another caller?
No, that was pretty much it. Thank you so much, Dan, for having such awesome guests.
Thanks for being a good friend.
Thank you, Tony. And I agree. Ross is an awesome guest. We are certainly glad to have him on the show. But yeah, in case you guys haven't seen it, we talked about it last time, but you did do a whole investigation on Scientology. And by investigation, I mean, you literally joined the church, and is an interesting series of episodes. So I recommend people check that out if you are interested in Scientology at all. But for now, we should get on to another caller. We have Bob, who is calling in from Colorado. Bob, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of ObjectivelyDan, or AKA Subjectively Dawn.
Stop it. That's never going to end. And Ross says, what we're talking about.
Sorry.
Anyway, it's a whole thing. Thing. I'm just kidding. I don't mind when people call me that. It's a funny joke. Continue.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm kind of a skeptic. I'm working on it. I was kind of brought up in an atmosphere in my family of accepting metaphysical and New Age stuff. And so I went to like some psychic fairs in quite often, and at least two psychics told me the same thing or similar things about past lives.
Okay.
And reading. Yeah. So right. I didn't know correlation or, just it could have been a coincidence, but or something more psychological and maybe even metaphysical. Well, not metaphysical, but like maybe like something more, which I don't know.
But maybe they're working from the same material too. You know, sometimes they kind of draw from similar figures in history or something. But I don't know. I don't want to assume. Let's talk about what they said.
Yeah. Remember any details?
Yeah. So a lot of details in each case. At least 2 psychics said similar things. I think more sounded similar too, but I can't remember. It was a long time ago. It was like 15, 20 years ago. But they said that I was a sniper in Vietnam, and that I got killed by a helicopter crashing into me, which is pretty specific, I think.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's interesting. That's funny too, because
I never. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, so I never prefaced any of this. I never gave them indicators of anything. They just went ahead and did this, and yeah, one of my interests was snipering, so that could play the role.
Okay.
And I read some books like The Ultimate Sniper and some other stuff, and I was really into the ballistics and some of the other features of being a sniper. And I was thinking of going into the military at that time.
But you didn't have that book tucked under your armpit when you were talking to them, I'm guessing.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't.
And there was no social media or anything that could have looked you up on either, I suppose.
Well,
no.
That's a good question, because what Dan's talking about is oftentimes there's this technique called hot reading, by which a psychic will look you up essentially and get actual information, or maybe talk to someone who knows you and get them to tell you something, but then they'll pass it off later as being something they've received in the moment. And then there's cold reading, which is where you look at a person and you get just natural cues from looking at them, or you try a series of guesses and you just phrase them in ways that no matter what the result is, it sounds like you got it right. As you were telling me that, I remembered that my last past life reading, I was told that in one of my lives, I died in an explosion in World War II, which I thought was interesting just because it vaguely reminded me of that. But I think my next question has to be, Bob, what year were you born?
1980.
Okay. So that's interesting. So if, let's say, you were fighting in Vietnam and you died, that means that either you had another life in between then and when you were born, or you kind of sat in some limbo and you just didn't have a body for, 16 years or 13 years or however long it was. So something to think about is the timeline there. But that's very interesting that you got that from 2 people at the same fair, you say?
No, different fairs, different years.
Different fairs,
remember, it was at least spaced by a year or 2. And there was probably a few more psychics that I saw that said similar to that. Yeah, I just can't be sure, but I know for sure there was 2.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're talking as a psychic and I'm looking at someone and I can guess kind of roughly when they were born, of course, I wouldn't say that you had previously died in the Gulf War, because that's, going to be wrong. That's going to overlap with your actual lifetime in this life. So I'm going to go back farther than that, either to, we don't have too many major wars. So it's going to be Vietnam or World War II. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I still think that sounds like a pretty cool coincidence that you got that from both psychics.
And they did add in those readings, each of those 2, that I had life after that. So maybe they were accounting for that time, because they said I died drowning as a kid off a boat, like in the ocean or something. I can't remember. One said the ocean, one said just water. They were more general about it, but that was not as discussed in detail.
See, that's interesting, because you could have died in Vietnam, then you could have been about 7 or 8, and then died again, and then get born into your now. So there's a little bit of a narrative there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I will say,
sense, but
it would make more sense. I don't know.
I will say, whenever I'm pretending to be a psychic, which occasionally I have to, there's a few good go-tos that I'll use with people when I'm trying to read about them and I just need to work off of a cold reading. I don't have any special info. Like, you can say, I sense that there was an incident involving water when you were young. And most people will say, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because most people have a story. I almost drowned when I was 4. And I brought this up at a family gathering over the holidays, actually. And like 6 people in the room all had stories about almost drowning when they were kids. So that's a good guess. Another one is like that you have a scar on your knee, and you ask them, tell me about the scar on your knee. And they'll go, how did you know about that? That's amazing. Or you can say just general psychological things. Like, I feel like you present a very confident exterior, but inside you're your own worst critic. And they'll be like, oh my goodness, how did you know that? Well, that's because it's true for everybody. Yeah.
That's great.
So I don't want to minimize these cool stories that you're telling, Bob, because that is cool and that they were so similar. I will throw in, though, that this is an additional psychological factor, and this isn't anything on you. This is just how we all work, that as we remember things that happened many years ago, or even recently, as we retell those stories to ourselves and to others, they do slightly change over time, and we make them a little better for telling. We make them a little more cohesive. And so there is, and this is something that psychics rely upon, there is kind of this tendency to highlight things that feel correct and right and make them more so, and to just kind of disregard and forget the things that don't connect with us. So potentially they may have said some other things that you would have said like, well, that's definitely not true. So just something to be aware of. Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
Oh, I definitely sifted through a lot of BS. Like, I didn't go over all the claims that they made that were false. I just picked a few that correlated. But I do remember another thing that they told me, and on another fair, which was interesting. And I don't know if you have time to get into it, but it's
go for it.
Regarding the future. So they predicted what I would do in the future. They said that I would marry a daughter of a general. So a general's daughter.
Oh, that's very specific.
And that happened once, but twice. Yeah, that was weird. So I did get divorced and then I got remarried, and I hope no one's listening because that'd be pretty specific. But
now, yeah. Okay, either of those people that you were married to, were they the daughter of a general?
Yeah, both of them.
No way.
Okay,
you're pulling my leg.
I won't go into the countries and the
wow,
the branches, but yeah, it's pretty crazy. So,
okay. That's pretty cool, Bob. But now I will say that there is a thing called, again, just another factor to be aware of. Not saying it's necessarily the case here, but there's an element of self-fulfilling prophecy where, you might, if someone tells you something's going to happen, you may help make it happen. And if you have in the back of your mind, someday I'm going to marry a general's daughter, and then you meet someone, just some special somebody, and you're like, oh, she's a general's daughter, you may feel a little emboldened, like, well, we're meant to be together. Just again, throwing it out there. Yeah, but
that's very cool. Specific. Wow.
That's cool. That's very cool, Bob.
I can see how that would rattle in your head, though, Bob. If that happened to me, I think I would think twice. I would think twice.
100%. 100%.
That's really cool. So even though that stuff happened to you, Bob,
in large part,
go ahead.
Oh, so in large part, I'd say like 95% of what I was told was probably BS, but it's just those lingering things. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to ask. Like, how much do you believe in it now? Because it sounds like you're still pretty much skeptical, but it's just like there's those one or two things just kind of hit on you.
I would have to have a really good BS detector when listening to a psychic now, because I probably wouldn't believe most of what they say.
Well, here's a fun exercise. And I mean, this is tricky because we have two, sample sizes that we're talking about here, two data points essentially. And, it's all very subjective, and there's a lot of information being thrown out. But I'd say if you're curious about this, if you want to try it again with a psychic that you thought might be reputable, ask them if you can record. Because a lot of them will let you do it. Just say like, hey, I'd love to be able to kind of, I have a hard time remembering all this stuff. I'd love to be able to refer to this later. Is it all right if I record? Most of them will say yes. And I would say have another one and maybe just kind of go through. And you were giving sort of a rough number, like 95% might be BS. Try to see if you can actually put numbers to it and say what matches up, what doesn't, and what's sort of in that hazy gray area in between.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. If I'm ever going to another psychic again, because I haven't for years, but if I ever do, I would definitely record it this time.
Yes,
Sweet.
definitely do that. Well, Bob, thanks so much for sharing those stories. That was
Super
really
cool.
excellent. Yeah, that's really cool. Most people who call in about their psychic stories, they're like, "Oh, but it was all BS." And this, you're like, "Oh, but this was kind of real, though." That would shake me too. I'm not gonna lie, that would shake me too. But thanks so much for your input on that, Bob. That's really awesome. I'm wondering now too, Ross, as I'm talking to you, how many psychics do you think you've actually talked to now at this point? What's your count?
I bet I could probably put this together. Now, I will mention I do the podcast. I'm also an investigator with the Center for Inquiry Investigations Group, which offers a $250,000 prize. So I've worked with psychics through that as well.
Yeah.
Total rough guess, but I would guess maybe like somewhere from 18 to 24 psychics probably I've interacted with. 18 to
24.
Somewhere in that range, I would probably guess.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That's a lot of psychics. Now, how many of them would you say were right in any shape or form?
Occasionally
kind of ambiguous, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing we try to do on the show is give credit where it's due. And so when Carrie and I go through a meeting, we'll gladly admit when, that was a solid hit. Sometimes it's like true, but sort of, but big deal because it's, that's not a big guess or a big leap. But sometimes, we'll say like, that was pretty good. That felt like it matched with me quite a bit. But we will do that recording when we can, because that really helps us to go back later. And sometimes we've even caught ourselves sort of working on their behalf. Like I remember once there was the psychic Cindy Kaza. She's a performer, and she'll even perform in comedy venues. But she said something about like my dad's sister, and I think she said like an A name. And later on when I was telling the story, I think I said, she mentioned Allie or Al or something like that. And we played the tape back. And no, I was doing a little bit of the work for her. She hadn't been that close, and I made her closer than she was.
Oh, yeah. You kind of, that's the thing too. I don't know what you call this effect, but you almost kind of like want to buy into it. You kind of want to play into it and be like, oh yeah, I want to believe this is true. And this is how I feel in the caps. I mean, that's like with a lot of religion too, but
and there's like a little bit of sympathy for the performer. You want to help them and not put them in an awkward situation.
Yeah.
And again, sort of the helping to tell the story in a clear way. It's kind of like when you go to tell a dream, no one wants to hear your dreams, but like you'll be telling it and, you'll say, okay, so I was in the back seat and it was my mother. I mean, well, it was a kangaroo, but it was also my mother. And you'll realize as you're telling the story, like, this doesn't make any sense. And so you'll start to like combine elements and make it simpler. And we do the same thing in life when we're telling stories. We create a simpler version.
Besides the people who have called in and have tried to say things about me, I've never actually been to a psychic. But I was kind of thinking about it. It's like, the Christians that I knew who said they had the gift of prophecy, that I guess that counts because they were trying to say things about my future. I don't even remember what they said. Probably that I was going to marry some Christian girl or something. I don't know.
We had an earlier investigation about the Pasadena International House of Prayer, PIHOP, and they would pray over you. But they would also foretell things that were going to happen in your future. And it was so weird because it was exactly like going to a psychic, but it was in a church setting and all within the guise of prayer and messages coming through the Lord. Yeah, it was such a strange bit of, syncretism of these two ideas blending where they shouldn't.
Which goes into this question of if demonic spirits can give you things in the future. I don't know. This tangent we don't have time for. What we need to get to right now actually is the mid rolls. So we're gonna play a bit of a quick little break for you guys, show you some of the other shows that we have here at the Atheist Experience Network. So check this out.
To start off with, what's got you turned on this week?
Oh, well, aside from Timothy Chalamet every day.
Every day.
Yeah, I would be happy to be abandoned in a desert with him anytime.
I definitely don't trust the Canadian government, Aaron. I just want to let you know, you guys are just a mining corporation in disguise.
Yeah,
and that is my stance.
And on Christmas Eve, the family beats the log with sticks and sings a song that translates to, if you don't crap well, we'll beat you with a stick.
Someone could in the future could look back at New York City and they could find a Spider-Man costume.
Exactly.
And then look at the Spider-Man comics. And that Spider-Man costume is not evidence that Peter Parker fought Dr. Octopus on the Brooklyn Bridge.
God wasn't enough for God. God needed more than God. This is what you're saying. God wasn't enough for himself. The prime disappointer.
Great mid-roll, as usual. Love the clips. I still firmly stand by the stance that the Canadian government is, in fact, just a large mining corporation in disguise. More on that on another time. Do your research. But anyway, Ross, we have lots of other people who want to talk to us. So let's go ahead and get to some other callers. We're going to talk to Sheila, who's calling in from New Jersey. Sheila, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi. So I'm in with you, and I hear that I'm your supporter of the week. I Heart Dogs.
I Heart Dogs. Oh, well, thank you, I Heart Dogs, for supporting on Patreon. Thank you so much.
Okay. I am a fairly new atheist. I was 60 when I left Christianity.
Okay.
And I'm 66 now, but it was actually my 7th anniversary, January 1st. And I still have superstitions that bother me. And I'll give you my latest example. When the COVID vaccine first became available, my husband and I went to a local hospital, and they were giving out the injections while we sat in our cars. And each time, the first and the second shots were given in my right arm. I got my booster the end of October, and I insisted, this was at the pharmacy, I insisted that the nurse turn the chair around because I and it's crazy, I know it's crazy, but I believed that since the first 2 shots had to go in my right arm, that the booster wouldn't work right if it didn't go in my right arm.
Interesting.
And it's crazy. I still believe that. And, you know, I have special earrings that I wear when the Phillies play, which doesn't seem to help them this past season. Just little things like that. I don't believe in the supernatural, but what is it that drives me to be superstitious? Where is my thinking going haywire?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, Ross, you could probably speak to this too, but like when I was first losing my religion, you know, REM, right? When I was first kind of like, you know, deconstructing, I didn't realize how many, I don't know if you call them tics or mannerisms or things that I would do that were there because of Christianity. I had a habit of going to church every Sunday. It was weird when I didn't go to church on Sunday. It felt very off when I didn't. When there were times of stress or when I felt like I did something wrong, like look at porn or something, like I felt a guilt in my heart. I felt like I had to pray to, you know, really get that out of me. And even after I've really lost a lot of that God belief, lost a lot of the surrounding things that encompass that, those inclinations were still there. The biggest one for me was a fear of hell. When I first was public about my atheism, I had nightmares at least 3 times that whole week, that when I first talked about it on the internet, that I was like about to die and that I had the choice to either follow God or go to hell. And it's only now in retrospect when I realize, oh, that's because like a fear of hell was a legitimate like threat to this reason that I believe, which is sad and stereotypical, but true. And it's true of a lot of people. So like these things that have been ingrained in you, I mean, they're just habits because you're human. That's just because I think humans, like, I don't know if I want to, because sociologists might disagree. I don't want to say we're naturally superstitious, right? Because you get into like some weird territory there. But like we definitely have like rituals. We definitely have patterns of thinking that come naturally to us because we do it for so long. And they're not always so neatly organized in our heads, even though they should be. One logical conclusion that, oh, I don't believe in God, therefore I have no reason to pray. That doesn't always necessarily follow with as people, right? And that's another reason why it can be so hard to really deconstruct this stuff, especially if you don't know a lot of people, if you're going through this by yourself, because if you're not bouncing off this stuff with people and talking like, hey, am I crazy for doing this? Then you do kind of feel like you're kind of off, right? But anyway, Ross, I know you can weigh in on this too.
No, that was a great response. I love this call, Sheila. This is such a fun topic. Yeah, and just to kind of mirror what you were saying, Dan, I did that same process where I kind of found myself still wanting to pray before meals. And actually, I still did go to church for many years, and I was like an usher. I asked special permission to be an usher, even as an atheist. And I remember the last time I really caught myself like doing something that I felt was superstitious was I was driving friends around, and I made some comment about how the traffic was really good today. And I immediately had this kind of like my muscles started to tense up, like I shouldn't have said that. Like somehow that would make the traffic worse. Like I was jinxing it. And I remember kind of catching myself, which is what you're doing, Sheila. You're like, you're already sort of recognizing this in yourself and going like, well, I didn't need that in my right arm. But, thankfully this was a situation where it was fine for you to get the booster in your right arm. That didn't really affect anything. So no harm, no foul. Speaking of fouls, no problem with wearing the same earrings to the baseball game. But you have this continuum of kind of when a tradition and something that worked in the past helps you get to the future. When that becomes not just a tradition, but like an actual superstition. And the question is, where is that line? And it's not a hard or fast line. I think maybe it would be drawn when like there's actually adverse effects on you or your relationships. But I love what you said, Dan, about having people around you to talk about it with. Because as long as, you're able to have a little bit of fun with it and just say, wow, human brains are funny. And be okay with that and just kind of work your way through it. I think it's all right. And I think it is fairly natural. I think we all have those feelings from time to time. And I always kind of point out that the science and superstition share one thing in common, and that's pattern seeking. Like we always want to find those connections and patterns and draw them. Science is just an improvement because you have these mechanisms to help you determine what are actual connections and what are false correlations. So it sounds like you're in a good place. I would say just stay mindful of this and do talk about it with friends and radio hosts.
If there's and hosts, right? If there's one thing I would want to imprint on you, Sheila, is that what you're going through is totally natural and you're not the only one. And I've gone through it. Ross has gone through it. Everybody, especially if you grew up in a religious place or a religious state of mind, pretty much everybody has gone through this in some degree or fashion. For myself, it's been a few years now, so like it doesn't happen as much. But I remember when I was first going through this stuff, and I was actually talking to other atheists. I was having this thought of like, wow, these guys just wake up and go to bed every day, and they don't even think about God. Like they don't even. It doesn't bother them at all that they don't have a soul or they don't believe it, right? And I was just fascinated by that because the group of people that I grew up around didn't think that way, didn't operate that way. There was some sort of higher power that they were operating under the assumption of, whether it was a specifically Christian or deistic entity, whatever. Everybody I knew believed in some form of higher power, and so that was really interesting. And I kind of had to almost reprogram myself and figure out like what am I now? Who is the person that I want to be? Because I can kind of be who I want. I don't have to be this follower of Christ anymore and have to dictate all of my decision making based on the morality of Jesus. And obviously that's a little bit of a different topic, but it's related, right? Because you kind of feel the need where, I can't think this way anymore because I'm not this person. And I would just like shy away from that if you can. You're a very recent convert, I would say, deconvert. Just let that process happen. And I've talked to people.
I was so immersed in the evangelical Christianity.
Yeah.
I was a Catholic for about 10 minutes before I left altogether. And I was so worried that I'm still believing in some force, like with the shot in the arm, that I believed that it had to be. But then I was questioning myself, well, what outer force dictates that? It's like I'm still sensing need to do these rituals, and it's stupid.
Well,
and you
for me,
way.
Yeah, for me, just the fact that you have that internal dialogue and that you caught yourself doing that and that you're asking yourself why, I think that sounds so healthy. So, I don't think it's anything to particularly worry about as long as it doesn't have any adverse effects on your life.
Yeah, if it does, then that's somebody that you should definitely seek out professional help, not podcast hosts, right? But like that's great.
Oh, good.
That's
okay.
Great. That's great. That's what I definitely suggest. I'm only here to reassure you that what you're going through is totally normal. And Sheila, I guarantee you're not the oldest person to deconvert. You're not.
Yeah,
probably not.
I had a good friend at my book club, Jerry Brown, not the governor, but he left Christianity when he was 65. And he always tells the story. He was looking at himself in the mirror one morning and he said, "You don't actually believe any of that, do you?" No. And he became a super active atheist, almost an evangelist. He would go out on the beach and talk with people and stuff. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well,
so anyway,
Ross, I want to thank you for bringing in the pattern seeking because
absolutely
I'm going to chew on that. That made a lot of sense. So that helped me, and thank you.
Of course.
Absolutely. It's funny, Dan, you were telling a story that reminded me of another one. For some strange reason, a lot of my spiritual revelations have happened within driving or being near a car. So I deconverted while driving, and I had that story about my superstitious traffic's jinxing. But another one was when I went out one morning. I think I was driving to school in college after my deconversion, and my truck wouldn't start. And paradoxically, I was so happy because I realized all of a sudden, like, oh my goodness, I don't have to ask myself what I did wrong or what lesson God is trying to teach me. My car is just broken. I need to get it fixed. That's so cool. That's it. That's the only problem. That's great.
Yeah, I know. It's like, there are people out there who like to pretend that the reason why people believe is because of this logical set of philosophical arguments. And undoubtedly there's people that are like that, but I don't think that's the majority. In my anecdotal experience, I think it is instinct. It's like, oh, this is a thing that God can help me through. This is a thing I need to go to him for. Like, it's just that internal dialogue that happens. I think that's what really guides people through this Christianity thing. But Sheila, I'm very impressed that you've deconverted so recently and that you first became a patron of the show. Great decision.
Yeah.
But I would suggest keep talking with people. Like we're saying, it's good that you have somebody professionally who can help you, but also again, just to reassure you, you're not alone. A lot of people go through this stuff, and you're going to find in a couple of years, you're going to look back and see, yes, I am. You might say that you're a different person than you were from when you talk with us. And when somebody else is deconverting, you can talk with them and say, yes, I remember when I was still praying every day and doing this and that. And so there's a lot of things you can look forward to for that. So Sheila, thanks so much for calling in. Yeah, thanks so much for calling in.
I heart dogs.
Yes, I heart dogs. I love that name. What a great name for that. But yes, thanks so much for calling in to the show, and hope you have a great rest of your evening. Fantastic calls so far. I already can tell we're probably not going to get to everybody for the end of the show. So just a reminder, we will be going to a Discord fan server after the show to kind of answer your questions. Link to that's going to be in the chat or the description if you are interested. Let's go ahead. This question is so specific to you, Ross, that we'll just talk with it. We're going to talk to Sprout. They, them pronouns. They're calling in from Canada. Sprout, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi. I am calling because I'm a big fan of Ono, Ross, and Carrie. I listen to all of your episodes while building a fort by the river in the city I live in.
Fantastic.
And I love it so much. Anyways.
Thank you.
I was calling in to ask about how you would go about starting your own investigation and then documenting it via a podcast.
Okay.
Isn't that so specific, Ross? Isn't that so specific? How can I? Yeah.
Sounds pretty specific. Absolutely.
I give that to you.
Very specific and very broad at the same time, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because we'll encounter this every now and then where we find kindred spirits who will write us and say, "Hey, do you want me to like report on this for you?" And we'll say, "Well, you know, it sounds like you've got your own stuff to talk about. Like, do it," you know, because our experience with Scientology may not be your experience with Scientology in a different town. Though, again, to repeat what we said with our earlier caller, be careful around them in particular. But I would say here's what Carrie and I did is we just happened to find that we were really passionate about this, and we were going to at the time it was the Kabbalah Center. We were doing it just because it was a fun thing to do as friends, and then people were asking us about it later, and we just happened to find two of these pretty rare weirdos, the people who enjoy doing this kind of stuff, and to like go through that whole experience, but not as someone who we often get called seekers, and I don't know if that's quite right. It's like we're not discontent with our lives. We're not looking into these things because we necessarily need them to provide us answers, but we're open to those answers. And so anyways, we just happened to find, ourselves, and that was rare. But you're clearly someone of the same build. And so I would say, go in with an open mind. If you're able to record. If not, take notes and copious notes, because that always helps later on to sort of have a record. Take pictures wherever you can. I'm always big on that, getting lots of photos wherever we go, because that's really helpful later, just to recall additional things that you might have missed, or as you're describing what you saw, that you have pictures. And I love, on our modern phones, it'll show you exactly where you were and the exact time. And that can really help you reconstruct things along with your notes. So gather as much information as you can, have fun, be safe, of course. The story will emerge. And that's sometimes the scary thing about doing the podcast is we'll go into one of these things, not knowing how it's going to end up or what we're going to get from it. But that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say too, as someone who also does a podcast, right? There's different avenues that you can take this, and you may not necessarily know what you want to do at first. This show, Truth Wanted, was going to be a completely different thing. I had different ideas. I had no intentions of it being a call-in show when I first started it. I actually wanted to be more street epistemology conversations that I would record and have and just kind of interview people and do stuff like that. I had the idea of it being a call-in stuff because I was working with the atheist community of Austin, and they already have all this great equipment to use and stuff. It was like, well, why not incorporate some of that? And I didn't know where the direction the show was going to take, but I'm really happy that it's become the way it is. So sometimes it kind of finds yourself in that process too. Don't think you have to exactly copy and paste what somebody else does, or think that it's going to be the same when you start, because you might find that you might like something better. And we always need more people that are contributing something originally. And that's not to say that even if it is copy paste, that's not bad either, because more voices, in my opinion, are better in general. But don't be afraid to experiment either. Figure out what's your voice in this, and what do you want to talk about? What do you think hasn't been said yet, or what do you think is something that you think there should be more voices on? So that would be my take on that.
All great points. And go ahead, Sprout.
Oh, yeah. I have an idea of what I would like to investigate.
Okay.
It was a group, or not really a group, but it was a something that I found that is an experience that I had, and then a bunch of other people had a very similar experience, and I was and I don't really know how I feel about it. I'm kind of being vague, but I also don't want to give, if I am going to go into it and stuff, I don't know how much I want to give away, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Trade secrets and all, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it was basically I listened to a band almost exclusively for 5 years when I was a teenager, and it's kind of a thing about this band that some people it's like a thing that people only listen to them. They their podcast is called I Only Listen to the Mountain Goats. I Only Listen to the Mountain Goats is a merch item they've sold for a long time. And
Carrie's a big fan of the Mountain Goats.
Yeah. Well, I love the mountain goats.
Yeah.
I just it's an interesting thing, and I don't know exactly how I feel about it. And I like to talk to other people who also want to listen to them
Interesting. Well, and that can be part of the storytelling, is you kind of figuring out how you feel about it. And to Dan's point, I think Dan's absolutely right. Like, you don't need to fit into any molds. Make it something that's uniquely you, and be flexible for it to change. So maybe it's not a podcast, maybe it's a series of articles, maybe it's a book, maybe it's whatever. But find some way to make it something that you feel ownership of. And that was something I felt like. We started our podcast in 2011. And at the time I was an avid podcast listener, and I thought I was late to the game. And so it seemed like we were too late. And there were so many other great shows out there already doing stuff that I admired. And I thought, well, I don't want to just do the same thing. And it was when we had the element of the firsthand investigations. And I think also adding the comedy element to it, and having fun with it. And also being nice. I think that was something that we really wanted to achieve with the show, is that we would be as non-judgmental as possible and not try to have fun at the expense of well-meaning people. I think that's when I felt like, wow, okay, we have something that feels new and fresh. And whatever it is, especially if it's a long-term project like a podcast, keeping that going, it needs to be something that you're excited about to follow it through to the end.
Yes, definitely. And if Ross was too late to the game, this show started in 2018. Yeah, so like that's even later.
You're never too late.
This wasn't even the first call-in show of the Atheist Experience Network. So like, there's some things there that you can call derivative, but I actually think it's okay to be derivative at first, because you do need some practice, right? If you look at, I think some of the most prolific writers of history, and you look at some of their earliest stuff, it's usually not their best stuff, because usually they're copying the people that they think are great, and they want to write about that too. So it's good to get some practice in, just even to kind of get used to what you want to do. Like Ross said, if there's a multimedia thing, is this a podcast, or is this also a blog, or is this a YouTube channel? Like figure out if you have that creative energy, see what you want to do with it. And definitely have fun, because you have to have fun to really get invested into it. Otherwise, I don't know, it becomes something else.
I won't read the whole thing, but sometime, Sprout, I'd recommend, if you haven't seen this already, do a search for Ira Glass creativity quote. He talks about that process of going through making bad stuff, but having an ear where you're making bad stuff, and you just have to go through that process and keep making bad stuff until you start making good stuff, and just stick with it. Trust the process.
That's a strategy I have used for novel writing.
Oh, fantastic!
There you go.
For years, so I've been doing novel writing. I've a National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, for years, and I've always done the.
Oh, cool!
I'm gonna write as much as I can, bad stuff. Keep doing bad stuff until that one time I'll get that good idea eventually. I'll get that good one eventually.
Fantastic!
Yeah, good for you, Sprout. Well, I hope whatever creative pursuit you find suits you well, and I wish you continued success with doing whatever you do. We're going to go ahead and go to another caller here, but thanks so much for calling in. And rock on. I love that. I like that. It's cool because, Ross, she was inspired by you. So
that's super cool.
How does that make you feel?
Oh man, like $1 million.
Yeah. It's cool. I love it. I love it when somebody says, "Hey, your thing's cool." It makes me want to do my thing, because I was like, "That's cool." I saw somebody else's thing, and it made me want to do a thing. So it's kind of a change.
I'll recall, like, from a history of animation course, the professor did one of those things where the professor drops out a question, and you're never going to get exactly the answer they're going for. But he said, "What makes a great artist?" And so we all threw out these various theories and stuff. And what he ended up presenting as his definition, I really liked and really stuck with me. And that was, a great artist is one that other artists imitate or respond to.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow. That. Yeah. Okay.
Like
that makes sense. Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good. Well, Ross, I'm looking at the time here, and I think we have time for one more call. Everybody else that's on the line, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, I talked too much.
No, it's great. It's great conversation, and it's not going to be the end of the conversation, because we will go to the Discord after show. So if you have a question, you want to ask it there, that is a good place to do it. For now, I'm going to go ahead and go to probably our last caller tonight. This is Jen with he, they pronouns. Jen is calling in from Australia. Jen, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up? Oh, hello, Jen. Are you there? Jen, one more call for you. Jen, I don't think we can hear you. Up. Jen's there. Hello, Jen. Hello.
Hey.
I was this close to muting you, Jen.
Hey, man. I was freaking out. I'm going, you work.
You made it. You made the cut. Congratulations. How can we help you, Jen?
Well, just a little bit of fun. Like you guys are talking about like past life things, and so like it's not like I'm like believe it so much that it's like I define my whole life by this thing, but I have like two very distinct phobias that I've had since I was a young child. And I don't know, just sort of something that sort of makes sense of them is like if such a thing as a past life was real, like maybe I was a tree that was killed by this certain like strangler figs, because I've been scared of a plant, these figs, since I was a young child. Like I saw a photo of them in this book. I was doing a project for primary school, and I just like it freaked me out. Like I was having cold sweats and like full panic attacks, and just every time like I see them, I can't even say the word. Like I know I said it just then, but like it's a real struggle for me to like even picture this plant. And so I was just sort of like, oh, isn't that funny? I'm scared of a plant. Ha ha ha. You know.
Now, I'm sorry to repeat the name here, but are we talking about figs?
Yeah, the ones that go on the trees. The birds drop the seed onto the branches of the trees, and then it eventually grows and strangles the host tree.
Oh, like a parasite. Okay.
Yeah. And like at first I was like, this is funny. Ha ha, how funny. I'm scared of a plant. You know, like most people are scared of spiders or, you know, this or that. But I'm scared of a plant, you know, like, and and the other phobia I have, which is kind of common, so it's not like it's like a big deal, but I have a claustrophobia where if I can't move, like if I'm stuck in a situation and I can't move, like even if I can move physically, like but I can't actually like get out of, like say I'm in a locked room even, or just something where I just cannot escape. It brings on a panic attack, which is pretty common. Like it's not like I'm just, you know, going, oh my gosh, this is evidence that I'm scared of a plant and I have claustrophobia. But the other thing is just, you know, talking about past lives, and I just sort of just give that kind of like little idea maybe out there that, like, you know, especially with all the science that is coming through, that plants are actually a lot more aware, and they're actually a lot more able to manipulate their environment than we've ever thought, you know. And so so it's just, I don't know.
So how does that, because you believe that you were a tree, or no, sorry, you don't believe that, but you've had this inclination that you were a tree in a past life because of this fear?
Like
is it the fear that drives that inclination? That's really interesting, because I feel like if you were afraid of it, you wouldn't think that you were one in a past life, but I don't know. Or
that you held over this this intense fear from a bad situation in a past life. Well, I mean, we were talking about pattern seeking earlier. That's understandable why you might draw that as a pattern.
Right.
And I don't know. There's a lot of different ways one could approach that. Certainly, we could say, okay, well, that's theory A. You know, let's think about maybe theories B, C, and D. You know, there may be other reasons. Like a lot of people have intense fears of needles. You know, and that's unlikely to have come from at least distant past lives, because that's a relatively new invention. That's interesting. I had to look up this plant that you're talking about. I actually wasn't aware of that. Now that I see pictures, like, okay, now I know what that's called. So thanks for the education there.
They freak me out, man. They freak me out. Like I can't even I have to do that whole like regress my brain thing. Like I can sort of talk about them on a surface level, but if I even begin to sort of, they freak me out. And I've been like that since I was a little kid. And like I've never really, because I was raised like fundamentalist Christian. So, you know, like reincarnation was witches and devils and Buddhism and stuff like that, you know, like, so like, I never really entertained that idea of, you know, successive lives and things like that. But yeah, I just thought it was just, you know, you were talking about past lives and stuff. And it's just a little thing that it's like, the fact that I'm scared of a plant is just so hilarious. And and just sort of just to bring up like, just like how the science of plants.
Well, yeah, let's talk about the science a little bit, because I mean, certainly we, you know, always keep it open as a theory. No need to like immediately shoot it down or anything like that. But something to be aware of with past lives is that, you know, we've had many centuries to try to figure this out and see if we can get some sort of handle on an actual like evidence of a past life story. And there are lots of stories out there. Like it's a very common belief in India, particularly, where it's kind of culturally available as an explanation. So you have a lot of people who will tell stories about, you know, the child who recounted the very detailed death that he had, you know, going down in a fighter plane. And they'll say that it was like exact in its details. And to make a very long story short, when we look into those and ask difficult questions, usually we find out that the stories are not quite as impressive as they've been handed down to us. And so speaking of science again, you have to kind of ask yourself, well, then how, in what form would say that information from the tree, whatever form of consciousness it may be, what form would it take? Because after physical death, you know, it doesn't, as far as we know, there's no like mechanism for a personality to exist outside of a brain for a human, for sure. So you'd have to think about like what would be the mechanism of that transference. And so far, science doesn't give us that. Not to say that it never could or never would, but
of course, there are lots of these folks who will say, well, consciousness is really more like you're a radio antenna and, you know, that's being beamed to. So it's actually coming from somewhere else, you know, and you can always kind of, it's really a God of the gaps kind of argument, except for memory and consciousness and things like that. But I think Ross's point is very succinct, right? You have to explain the mechanism by which this would work. Otherwise, it's just a guess. It's just an idea. And there may be some other
interesting idea.
An interesting idea for sure. But, you know, like Occam's razor, right? Is it more likely that you've had this past life, or there's these patterns of experiences that you've had that cause you to come to this belief? For myself, I remember being terrified of the rapture as a kid. I'd go inside a place and I'd see clothes laid out from the laundry, and I'm like, oh my God, my family's gone from the rapture. It's like, no, your clothes were just laid out. Or today even, Jen, I have this weird thing with sirens. I hate sirens, specifically like tornado sirens, because I grew up in Waco, Texas. Waco, you know, there's tornadoes that come around the area. So they have this siren that goes off. I know the exact time. It's the first Friday at 10 o'clock every month, and it still freaks me out every time. And I have to double check, like, this is the time, right? This is the time. It's not like a test, because they don't say it's a test. They should say it's a test every time. Yeah. That would make me feel better. But anyway, you know, it's one of those things where I don't know. I think I'm rational, probably not, but like some people say that I am, and it's like I still have this weird thing that freaks me out, and I don't know. Everybody's got those. So
yeah, for my wife, it's like the sound of a submarine or anything to do with a submarine, you know, and that's understandable. And I think things that we're exposed to when we're kids, especially, can have an outsized impact on our psychology, because they just get this kind of deep-rooted position.
Definitely. So anyway, I don't think it's funny that you are afraid of plants. I think that's totally, I think that's, especially looking at crazy looking plants, that's reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know a guy that's afraid of, it's trypophobia. You ever heard of trypophobia? It's where you're afraid of holes, like open holes in places. I know a guy, you'll show him, you know what I'm talking about, right? I've shown him pictures of like holes on a skin or holes on a plant, and his hair will raise on his body. It's the weirdest thing. And he's not like, you know, like going to run away from it, but it freaks him out on like a psychological, like an internal level. I don't know. It's interesting. It's really interesting. So, A lot of things to the body that we don't know about. Anyway.
So yeah, Jen, I don't think you need to feel strange or weird or like there's anything wrong. But maybe it is worth, and I don't know if you have already, but it might be worth just kind of working through those thoughts with a professional who can just kind of help you think about it more and come up with different theories.
Well, I actually went up to far north of Queensland, and there's heaps of them around in the Daintree rainforest, and I actually forced myself to go up to them and touch them, and
you did some exposure therapy. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, man, yeah, but I can now talk about them on a surface level, so it sort of worked a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's good. This might be a good subject of like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? I think this would be like a classic example of something that kind of therapy usually talks about. But I don't know. It sounds like it's just the thing that's in your life that you just kind of have to deal with, and people might make fun of you for it, but we won't make fun of you, Jen. That's fine. You can have all the phobias you want. Anyway, Jen, thanks so much. Thanks so much for calling in. I'm glad that we got to your call. Thanks so much. Got a little bit of cutting off there, but that's okay because Australia, it's on the other side of the world. I understand. And to be fair, there's a lot of things to be afraid of in Australia. Right?
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't think plants. I mean, like that should be just one of many concerns that I
looking up the pictures of a parasitic.
I didn't get to look it up. I gotta look this up.
Strangler fig. Yeah, that's totally rational to be freaked out about that.
I got to see this. Oh, you know what? I have seen these before.
Originally, I was going to joke that you might have been Jesus in a past life because he hated figs, but this is different.
Right. That's true. That'd be a good point. But yeah, a plant, that's so specific because like I feel like as a plant, you wouldn't have any memories, right? I don't know.
Yeah, well, you'd have a little more work to do to describe how that memory would be stored and then transferred. Because people love to say energy is preserved. When things die, their energy is not destroyed. Well, yes, but they leak that heat out. There's no reason to suspect that it maintains that high level of order that requires a brain.
That old entropy thing,
Yeah, exactly. Entropy tends to increase.
Right. Well, Ross, we are about at the end of the show here, but this isn't the last chance to talk to us. Like I said, we're going to go over to the Discord in just a second, but I want to give a special thank you again to Ross Blocher for being on the program. Ross, you were a fantastic guest. I'm so glad you got to come back with us. Please tell everybody, where can people find you at and what you're up to?
Thank you, Dan. Oh, man, super fun conversation. Thank you to all the callers. You can find us, Oh No Podcast on, there we go. This is helpful because I was not going to remember it all. Oh No Podcast on Twitter, Facebook.com/onrac, ONRAC. That's short for Oh No, Ross and Carrie. We are at MaximumFun.org and OhNoPodcast.com. Hope to see you there.
Perfect. And folks, if you're tuning into this for the first time, this is Truth Wanted. We do this thing every week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. It's a lot of fun. We get into a lot of interesting and wacky conversations, always have different guests coming up. So it's going to be really, really cool to see where we're going to take things this year. I'm already excited. Next week, MD Aware is going to be hosting the show with a special guest. So look forward to that. And this show is available on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave a like, leave a comment, leave 5 stars, whatever you can to help out the show would be fantastic. A couple of different ways you can support the show as well is one through patreon.com. That's where we give a special shout out every week to those who donate on there. So thank you to everybody who does that. Another way is through our merch. We got some merchandise. It's pretty cool. We're going to show it on the screen. There it is. We got it's hoodie season again, baby. If you're in the States, it's hoodie season again. So get the Truth Wanted hoodies. It's awesome. And of course, we got the masks and all kinds of other stuff for you. Another way to support the show is clicking join. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can become a member on there and you get cool little emoticons. If you're watching this in the live chat with my face on it and the logos, very fun stuff. This podcast is a part of the AEN Podcast Network. So there's all kinds of other shows that you saw in the mid-roll, which you should definitely check out. And hey, maybe I'll be on some of them sometime. I usually am. And so a lot of cool shows to look forward to on there. Yep. tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. If you want to contact the show, it's truth@atheist-community.org, not .com. I said .com a couple weeks ago and I got grilled pretty hard. So it is .org. And if you want to find me, I'm on Twitter @ObjectivelyDan. And that's a good place to talk to me. Last but never, ever, ever ever, least, we have to thank the wonderful, fantastic crew that helps make this show happen every single week. There's the crew cam, the can't handle the truth cam going on in the background. Those folks are making this show happen. Thank you so much to the crew. Thank you to all the mods, and thank you to everybody that helps make this thing happen every single week. Ross, any words of wisdom you want to give out before we end the show?
Ooh, all right. Well, my favorite quote is from the science fiction author Philip K. Dick, and it's reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away.
I like that. I like that a lot. Folks, this has been another episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch the nonprofits and join the hosts in the live chat. Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.